Hello and welcome to today's video where we'll be exploring one of the most influential military theories of the modern era, Mahanism. If you've ever wondered why nations spend billions on naval fleets or why control of the seas has been so crucial throughout history, then this exploration of Alfred Thayer Mahan's revolutionary ideas will fascinate you. Before we dive in, consider this. The vast oceans covering 71% of our planet have never just been empty spaces to cross, they've been highways of power, wealth, and influence. And no one understood this better than Alfred Thayer Mahan, whose theories fundamentally changed how nations viewed naval power and global strategy. Alfred Thayer Mahan was born in 1840 at West Point, New York, where his father was a professor at the United States Military Academy. Despite this Army connection, Mahan chose a different path, graduating from the U.S. Naval Academy in 1859 and serving in the Union Navy during the American Civil War. But Mahan wasn't just another naval officer. What set him apart was his intellectual approach to naval strategy. After years of service and study, he became president of the newly established Naval War College in Newport, Rhode Island in 1886. It was there that he developed and refined the theories that would change the course of naval history. Mahan was a prolific writer, but his most influential work was undoubtedly The Influence of Sea Power Upon History, 1660 to 1783, published in 1890. This groundbreaking book wasn't just read by naval enthusiasts. It transformed how nations viewed the very concept of power in the international arena. At its heart, Mahanism revolves around a simple yet profound idea: control of the seas equals control of the world. But what exactly does this mean in practical terms? Let's break down the key principles of Mahan's theory. First, Mahan argued that sea power was the decisive factor in determining which nations would dominate global affairs. He studied how Britain had risen to become the world's preeminent power through its command of the seas, allowing it to build and protect a vast empire spanning multiple continents. Second, Mahan identified 6 key elements that determine a nation's sea power potential. 1. Geographical position. Nations with access to open seas and lacking vulnerable land borders have natural advantages. 2. Physical conformation. The nature of coastlines, including natural harbors and access to trade routes. 3. Territory size. The length of coastline and the capacity to support naval bases. 4. Population size. A large population provides manpower for naval operations and maritime industries. 5. National character. Whether a nation's people are naturally inclined toward maritime activities and commerce. 6. Governmental character. Whether a government has the vision and will to develop and maintain naval power. Third, Mahan emphasized that naval power isn't just about winning battles at sea, it's about controlling maritime commerce during both war and peace. He coined the concept of command of the sea, which meant having the ability to use the sea for one's own purposes while denying that same use to adversaries. Finally, Mahan advocated for a particular naval strategy centered around the concentration of powerful battleships into a decisive fleet. Rather than dispersing naval forces for commerce raiding or coastal defense, he believed in assembling overwhelming force to destroy enemy fleets in decisive battles. To truly understand Mahanism, we need to place it in its historical context. Mahan developed his theories during a pivotal moment in world history, the late 19th century, when the Industrial Revolution had transformed warfare with steam-powered ships, improved artillery, and steel armor. The United States was emerging as a major power following the Civil War. European powers were engaged in a scramble for colonial possessions worldwide. New technologies like telegraphs were connecting the world like never before. International trade was expanding dramatically. In this environment, Mahan's ideas weren't merely academic. They offered a roadmap for nations with ambitions of greatness. By building powerful navies, they could protect their commerce, project power globally, and ensure their place among the world's leading nations. Perhaps nowhere was Mahan's influence more profound than in his home country. Before Mahan, the United States had maintained a relatively modest naval force focused primarily on coastal defense and commerce protection. But Mahan's theories, enthusiastically embraced by political leaders like Theodore Roosevelt, transformed American naval policy. Roosevelt, who had personally corresponded with Mahan and absorbed his theories, became one of the most vocal advocates for American naval expansion. As Assistant Secretary of the Navy and later as President, Roosevelt pushed for the construction of a modern battleship fleet that could project American power globally. The results were dramatic. Between 1890 and 1910, the U.S. Navy transformed from a modest force to one of the world's largest and most modern fleets. This naval expansion coincided with and enabled America's emergence as a global power, exemplified by events like the Spanish-American War of 1898, which resulted in the U.S. gaining territories like the Philippines, Guam, and Puerto Rico. The construction of the Panama Canal gave the U.S. Navy rapid access between the Atlantic and Pacific. The Great White Fleet World Tour of 1907 to 1909 demonstrated America's new global reach, and the establishment of naval bases across the Pacific. Mahan's vision of America as a naval power with global interests and responsibilities had become reality, forever changing the nation's role in world affairs. While Mahan was American, his influence extended far beyond U.S. shores. His works were translated into multiple languages and studied carefully by naval planners and political leaders worldwide. In Britain, already the world's predominant naval power, Mahan's theories reinforced existing strategic thinking and provided intellectual justification for maintaining naval supremacy against emerging rivals. In Germany, Kaiser Wilhelm II was so impressed by Mahan's work that he ordered copies placed in every ship in the German Navy. Admiral Alfred von Tirpitz used Mahanian principles to justify Germany's massive naval buildup, which directly contributed to the Anglo-German naval race, one of the factors that heightened tensions leading to World War I. In Japan, naval leaders carefully studied Mahan and applied his principles to their own strategic situation. Japan's decisive victory over Russia in the 1904 to 1905 Russo-Japanese War, particularly the Battle of Tsushima, was seen as a validation of Mahanian principles of concentrated naval power and decisive battle. Even in the Soviet Union, despite its primarily continental focus, naval theorists engaged with Mahan's ideas, though often critically. During the Cold War, Admiral Sergei Gorshkov's development of Soviet naval power reflected engagement with, though not wholesale adoption of, Mahanian concepts. Mahan's theories weren't just influential in peacetime naval planning, they profoundly shaped how wars were fought at sea throughout the 20th century. The naval arms races leading up to World War I reflected Mahan's emphasis on capital ships and concentrated fleets. The Battle of Jutland in 1916, while tactically inconclusive, strategically validated aspects of Mahan's thinking about command of the sea, as Britain's Grand Fleet, despite not destroying the German High Seas Fleet, maintained its blockade of Germany. World War II saw both confirmation and challenges to Mahanian thinking. The decisive fleet actions Mahan had envisioned occurred in the Pacific War between the U.S. and Japan, notably at Midway in 1942. Yet the war also demonstrated the growing importance of aircraft carriers, submarines, and amphibious warfare, aspects not fully anticipated in classical Mahanism. The Cold War presented new challenges to Mahanian thinking with the advent of nuclear weapons, ballistic missile submarines, and power projection through carrier battle groups. Yet even as technology evolved, the core Mahanian principle of controlling vital sea lanes remained central to naval strategy. Despite its enormous influence, Mahan's theory has not been without critics. Some of the main criticisms include 1. Technological determinism. Mahan's focus on battleships and decisive fleet engagements didn't fully anticipate revolutionary technologies like submarines, aircraft carriers, and missiles that transformed naval warfare. 2. Continental blindness. Critics argue that Mahan underestimated the importance of land power and overemphasized the maritime dimension of strategy. The Soviet Union, for example, became a superpower primarily through continental rather than maritime strength. 3. Historical selectivity. Some historians suggest that Mahan cherry-picked historical examples that supported his theories while ignoring contradicting evidence. 4. Economic costs. Building and maintaining the kind of naval forces Mahan advocated requires enormous economic resources that many nations simply cannot sustain. 5. Environmental limitations. Geographic realities mean that not all nations can become sea powers, regardless of their ambitions. These criticisms remind us that while Mahanism contains powerful insights, it is not a universal template for national strategy. Context matters, and what worked for Britain or the United States may not work for nations with different geographic, economic, or strategic circumstances. Given all the technological and geopolitical changes since Mahan's time, we might wonder whether his theories remain relevant today. The evidence suggests they do, though in evolved forms. China's dramatic naval expansion in recent decades follows distinctly Mahanian logic. Chinese strategists explicitly reference Mahan when discussing the need to protect vital sea lanes carrying energy imports and export goods. China's development of artificial islands in the South China Sea and its growing blue water navy reflect a Mahanian understanding of the relationship between economic prosperity, national greatness, and maritime power. The United States continues to maintain the world's most powerful navy, with global reach centered around aircraft carrier battle groups. While the technology would be unrecognizable to Mahan, the strategic logic of maintaining command of the seas to protect global commerce and project power remains fundamentally Mahanian. Even in the age of cyber warfare, space technology and drones, control of the sea lanes remains vital. Approximately 90% of world trade still travels by sea, making maritime security as important as ever. As we conclude our exploration of Mahanism, it's worth reflecting on the extraordinary legacy of Alfred Thayer Mahan. A naval officer and academic who never commanded in battle became one of history's most influential strategic thinkers, fundamentally altering how nations conceive of power and security. Mahan understood something timeless, that the vast oceans connecting our world aren't just barriers to be crossed, but highways of commerce, communication, and power. The nation that controls these highways gains tremendous advantages in both peace and war. While tactics, technologies, and specific applications may evolve, the core insights of Mahanism remain relevant over a century after Mahan first articulated them. As long as the world's economies depend on maritime trade, and nations seek to project power beyond their shores, Mahan's ideas will continue to influence strategic thinking. Thank you for joining me on this journey through one of history's most consequential strategic theories. If you've enjoyed this exploration of how naval power shapes global politics, please like this video, subscribe to our channel, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Until next time, remember that the seas connect us all, and control of those connections remains one of the fundamental elements of global power.